later on. We'll now move on to the final formal paper for this morning's seminar. I'm particularly grateful to Jesus Fernandez, who was able to step in at really very late moment when another speaker had to pull out. I'm particularly pleased because speaking about Spain, Spain is a big state with a lot of archaeology and a lot of work that's been done. So it is great that it's still able to be represented in this morning's seminar. I am very pleased that we are able to have that area represented. Also pleased that Jesus was able to speak because he and I have worked together on a recent publication which he edited, which included a paper of mine. Jesus is a research fellow at the University of Oviedo. He's director of several archaeological projects, including an archaeological museological community project in the Asturias in Spain. He has an honorary position as well at the Institute of Archaeology in London. His work is centred on the archaeology of cultural landscapes and heritage studies, and he recently co-edited a volume on the archaeology of medieval villages currently inhabited in Europe. So again, another excellent speaker for this seminar. So thank you very much again, Jesus, for being able to step in at the last minute, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Karen. Can you see the slides, Morgan?
Yes, yep, we can see that.
Thank you very much. So, as I said, thank you very much, Karen. Thanks to the Medieval Settlement Research Group for your kind invitation to participate in this seminar. And it's good to see you and some speakers like this. I have not had the chance to see in some time, and I'm glad to participate. I'm going to talk about the relationship between infrastructure archaeology in Spain and medieval settlements, although from a partial point of view, as I indicated in the title. But let me explain briefly why this approach will be limited. Firstly, because I'm not a commercial or rescue archaeologist, nor do I work in that type of archaeology. I've worked just a bit a long time ago, and therefore my view is more academic, from outside, and necessarily incomplete. The archaeological projects I'm involved, as Karen said, are located in rural areas on small scale and very close to the communities. So I consider myself a community archaeologist, and this is why my view of this type of archaeology is quite distant and also quite critical. Secondly, the impact of this type of archaeology, and I'm going to, yeah. As I said, the impact of this type of archaeology has been scarce in some territories, such as Aragón, La Rioja, Cantabria, or Asturias itself, where I live and work, where archaeology continues to be more dependent on university research projects, and the archaeology of infrastructures has been especially intense in the surroundings of large cities such as Barcelona, or especially Madrid. My examples will come primarily from these places, but there is another gap. Finally, my approach is partial because I focus above all on the early Middle Ages of the north of Spain, as this is my main research area. I hope, despite these conditioning factors, to adequately illustrate the situation in Spain and formulate in a balanced way what the main contribution of this type of archaeology has been and what their limitations are in the Spanish archaeological context. So let's turn now to the next slide. Let's turn in the. So we are going to talk about that topic. I think it's important to understand the impact of infrastructure archaeology in medieval archaeology in Spain, because this double birth of academic and commercial archaeology at the same time in Spain. Why is this important? Because it explains why commercial archaeology has had a greater impact on medieval archaeology than other archaeologies like prehistoric archaeology or classic archaeology, which were well established in university departments before the emergence of commercial archaeology in the 90s of the 20th century. Unlike other European territories where there are long traditions of medieval archaeology, in Spain it's relatively recent. It began to lay its foundation in the first Congress of the Spanish Medieval Archaeology held in Huesca in 1985. It is not the origin of medieval archaeology, of course. There were medieval archaeologists before this date, but there was not medieval archaeology as a specific area of knowledge, as an academic discipline, epistemologically differentiated from history. Almost at the same time, in 1985, the law of Spanish historic heritage and the adoption of global policies, guidelines on heritage safeguarding were approved, and this gives rise to the birth of the liberal profession of archaeology in Spain. Now, during the 90s, commercial and academic medieval archaeology evolved separately in some different ways. On the one hand, departments of archaeology and the first areas of medieval archaeology were established in some Spanish universities with historiographic approaches that were being renewed as a very traditional in some of its aspects, with small-scale projects and low budgets in the 90s. I'm talking about the 90s, so the 20th century. On the other hand, and at the same time, there was an exceptional building boom building bubble between 1997 and 2008 that makes Spain unique in the European context. This boom generated a huge demand for commercial archaeology, a sector that was almost non-existent before the 90s. Public demand grew at the same time as the private one and contributed to the growth of the bubble and the promotion of infrastructure works. Thus, large companies and archaeology teams were formed that undertook the excavation of large areas, managing large budgets, inconceivable in university departments. So during this time, commercial archaeology can be said to overshadow medieval academic archaeology. However, after 2008, this type of archaeology practically disappeared after the crisis and the busting of the real estate bubble. There is practically nothing left of it now, only results that are often scattered and published or partially published, waiting to be systematized. In this graph, on the next slide, thank you. In this graph that I title Archaeology at the Rhythm of Capitalism and Its Crisis, these three stages I talked about are summarized, ironically, using some familiar terms for medievalists, like one period or Dark Ages. But yeah, we have these three stages: the formative period of rescue archaeology in the 80s, the warm period of rescue archaeology, the golden era between the mid-90s and 2008, and the Dark Ages now. I'm going to focus on the time range of the mid-90s to 2010, more or less, when this great impact of the archaeology of large infrastructures took place, and assess some of its results for medieval archaeology. And then I will reflect also what is happening now. But in conclusion, these ideas, this first slide, summarize the important impact that commercial archaeology has had on the development of young young Spanish medieval archaeology as a whole. At the time, the methodological approaches of medieval archaeology were being renewed. Researchers were becoming increasingly interested in the transformation of settlement and material culture, extensive excavation by archaeological studies, and the study of certain material culture that was previously neglected, like common pottery, for example. But these ambitious projects were difficult to carry out from the university due to their high budget, and it was necessary to put these approaches into practice. And in this context, in the 90s, the archaeology of infrastructures opens up a huge window of opportunity, and some archaeologists from private companies began to work with these approaches and discover fields of silos, post-hole fields, and as have to which archaeological attention was not previously paid, and which results to be the context of early medieval village and early medieval settlement. I'm going to show you some examples now. It is the moment in which the great extension excavations are carried out in medieval rural settlements, such as the one that I will show you. The impact of this archaeology has been so important that some scholars speak or talk of an authentic archaeological turn in the Spanish medieval archaeologists at that time, at the night, according with Julio Escalona words. So let me show you some examples of this excavation. Firstly, I'm going to focus on the surroundings of the city of Madrid. I think that the most impressive examples correspond to the excavation in the sites near the city. Those of Cosquez or El Pelícano stand out as an example. And these are, here is a map showing some of the sites excavated in the south of Madrid or in the surroundings of the city of Madrid. These are sites excavated in large areas, far from the small-scale excavations that were carried out in Spain before this decade, increasingly freed from the historiographic approaches. And this is why they address some problems, such as Visigothic archaeology in the 5th to the 8th centuries, with a completely different methodological approach. Extensive excavation, as I pointed out, the monumentalization of the archaeology programs, projects by archaeological control, etc., leading to describe for the first time the spatial relationships of rural settlements in this period, as well as their internal structure, then completely unknown topics until then. This is the example of Cosquez near Madrid, where a complete early medieval rural settlement was documented, including its necropolis, as you can see in the picture, and agrarian areas. And the settlement, you can see the spatial relationship between the settlement and the necropolis. And it's important because before this period, the early medieval archaeology was mainly focused in necropolis itself, and we didn't know anything about settlements itself. So this is why this archaeology was very important. Yeah, and we talk a bit about the agrarian archaeology. Yeah. Precisely, one of the great contributions of this type of archaeology has been to incorporate the study of plots and agricultural areas. In the case of Cosquez, it is observed that the domestic units would comprise an extension of their own line in which all activities would be carried out, as well as the construction and reconstruction of domestic structures. It has been possible to appreciate how the dimensions of these plots are reduced over the centuries, but since the early Middle Ages, rural housing, however modest, would always have its own space with these characteristics. This type of record and this type of study would not have been possible without this type of extensive excavation. And I consider it to be one of its most important contributions. Without understanding productive areas, we will never understand the logic or functioning of medieval settlements. Let me show you more examples like Pelicano and other settlements, same characteristics than Gothic in some aspects. So we have here timber buildings or silos that combined with other kind of architecture. Yeah. And here you go, another example, like the early medieval farms excavated. So they are different kind of settlements, more dispersed, and from different periods, in the same areas, but from different periods, and they are not properly villages. We can consider them like farms of different categories. Yeah. And now I will provide you some examples from Galicia. I think that talking about archaeology, talking about archaeology, it's interesting to highlight these works that were developed in Galicia around the Ciudad de la Cultura infrastructure. These interventions were carried out in cultivation terraces and provided very old chronologies for some of them from the 6th century, which indicated a very old process of formation of this agrarian landscape, much earlier than what medieval historiography suggested. In practice, it meant a very interesting renewal of the approaches to agrarian archaeology that until then have been handled in the Spanish context. In Catalonia, there was a situation similar to Madrid. And between the mid-90s and 2008, the number of archaeological activities around different types of infrastructure carried out by private companies intensified. In total, in this period, about 50 settlements were excavated and dated between the 5th and 11th centuries, some extensive and almost fully documented, while others were not. One of the problems with this type of infrastructure archaeology is its territorial bias. In the Catalan case, it is even more pronounced than in Madrid. The areas with an archaeological record, as you can see in the picture, are mainly limited to the surroundings of Barcelona, while other areas, mainly rural areas, remain empty. Something that can be said about the rest of Spain, as I pointed out at the beginning. Some of these sites were heavily excavated and are not well studied or published. There have also been confusing chronological attribution due to the lack of standardized criteria. This is a general problem through Spain, the lack of standardization, and this is one of the characteristics of this record, the diversity of procedures, regional regulations, requirements, and the absence of a common research framework. Despite all these limitations, a record of these characteristics is available for the first time, although it is a line of research that has not been developed, but that allows us to understand the first early medieval settlements in Catalonia and its changes with respect to late antiquity. So, to sum up this archaeology, and here you go some examples of this excavation in Catalonia. And as I said, this archaeology and its new record has opened the opportunity to carry out much more complex socio-economic analysis of the early medieval settlement in the Iberian Peninsula. But on the other hand, there has been dislocation between academic and non-academic archaeology. Most of these projects have been performed without research institutions and have not been driven by research questions or within research projects. In addition to this, we must also bear in mind the situation of normative dispersion of the Spanish territory, highly decentralized and with territorial particularisms that vary in their demands and or controls. And probably this differences explain also the different results of control archaeology or preventive archaeology. All this has made very difficult the creation of this common research framework, I said. After this gold period of commercial archaeology in Spain, a new era of darkness began in 2008 with the economic crash. That means, in fact, almost the end of infrastructure archaeology in Spain. I'm going to talk a bit about this post-crisis scenario here in the last 10 years. The economic crisis of 2008 put an end to the expansive cycle of public and private investment in Spain. Here you go, some graphic information. You have the example of transport infrastructures in investment in Spain, and you can see how from 2008 and 9 the public investment in infrastructures is going down. The crash of housing, construction, and cutbacks in the public sector stopped this type of archaeology and has grown around this emerging sector. According to Eva Vargas, more than 70% of Spanish archaeological companies closed by 2017. With this, most of the great medieval excavation projects dispersed. Investment in the public sector of large infrastructures, as I explained, has not recovered. The 19 political crisis is not helping to this situation and revealed the true fragility of this non-academically oriented model of archaeology. While it undoubtedly made important contributions, as I have already explained, its market-dependent orientation made it temporary and non-continuous. The positive fact is that some company archaeologists, upon abandoning their private activity, not private, but this kind of excavation, because there are no demand, and they joined the research doing doctoral thesis that took advantage of and systematized this record. On the other hand, the few professionals who remain in archaeology, around 30%, have oriented their projects by introducing a turn towards community archaeology, large-scale heritage dissemination projects that are sustainable over time. During the last decade, other young researchers who did not work in private companies such as Carlos Tejerizo take advantage of the records generated during the investment boom by systematizing them to write doctoral thesis. The PhD of Carlos Tejerizo was about this area, the Duero Basin, and there are some differences of this area in relation with other areas of Spain. Here, the impact of the emergency intervention in the northern plateau of the Iberian Peninsula developed differently compared to other territories, such as Madrid, Catalonia, or Galicia. Although there was a very significant number of interventions, many of these were mainly linked to the construction of railways, highways, and small industrial estates. The result was the attainment of a very large mass of data on early medieval rural context from long-distance linear excavations, but there were no interventions in large areas, for example, in the south of Madrid. Carlos Tacarifo's thesis is an example of an attempt to systematize this record in order to generate new scientific knowledge from it. Unfortunately, this work is the exception rather than the rule, as most archaeological excavation reports of this type remain scattered and unpublished. Let me conclude with this inconclusive conclusion. The current situation is that the archaeology of large infrastructure has practically disappeared now in Spain. Archaeology professionals have abandoned their activity or have taken refuge in other sectors or academia. Spanish medieval archaeology has returned to the university setting. The results of infrastructure archaeology has thus been variable. On the one hand, medieval archaeology has greatly benefit from excavation around the structures. These excavations have been a true experimental environment in which to test new methods and strategies to excavate. Yet it has proven to be a fragile archaeology, dependent on the rhythms of capitalism and its crisis, unable to adapt to low funding context. On the other hand, academic archaeology, which for 2 decades viewed commercial archaeology with the mixture of envy and suspicion, has survived thanks to its framework of greater job security, but has not always had the capacity or interest in systematizing these records and creating a common framework for reflection work. I think that academic archaeology has been maturing and has learned a lot methodologically from the experience, and above all, it is in charge of making the relevant reflections, taking note of the consequences and learning from these lessons, which indicate that it is necessary to support an archaeology guided by knowledge, socially committed, and economically sustainable, with a strategy of economic diversification, not only dependent on the private market or another expansion or nor crisis of capitalism. That's all I have to say about infrastructure archaeology in medieval settlement in the north of Spain and early medieval period. Apologies for my partial review, mainly focused in this area, and thank you very much for your attention.